Welcome everybody again. It's Fraser Nation, the Trigonometry Chronicles, and today we're going over 5.4, applying trig functions. This is basically the beginning of solving right triangles using sine, cosine, and tangent. So I'm gonna warn you, there's nothing new in this section. You've learned everything you've needed to know in Geometry 250. Okay. Chapter 7. That's really where you should have got the bulk of this. You probably did see a little bit of this in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, but for here on out, I'm going to assume that, from 5.2 and 5.3, you know what you're doing, basically. So, at the end of this lesson, I want students to be able to use trigonometry to find the measure of the sides of right triangles. We're going to get to a point where we can solve all three angles and all three sides of a right triangle, and then with non-right triangles. But for now, let's just worry about solving that one side. SOHCAHTOA, which you guys know the S is for sine, cosine is for the C, and tangent is for T. You're basically going to be able to use these to solve for those sides. Theta, unknown angle. This is basically your X for the angle. The opposite and the adjacent sides, they're going to change. It depends on where you put your theta at. Okay? So remember, it depends on where you put your theta at for your opposite and adjacent sides, but your hypotenuse is always going to stay the same. Capital letters in a triangle are usually the angles themselves. The opposite sides of those angles are the lowercase version of those letters. So if you got angle big A, then the opposite side is going to be lowercase a. We'll go over that in a couple of minutes. And finally, I just need you to remember, how do you go between decimals and DMS, which is degrees, minutes, seconds. I will be able to throw out an advertisement for an app that I've been using on my phone, because you guys can't take the calculators home. So I will be looking out for that. This is for Android. I'm not really sure about iOS right now, so just stay tuned. I'll be able to find something for you. Remember, this is a video, so you're able to pause, go back, rewind as many times as you need. But the same rule applies, guys. If you see it on the screen, unless it specifically says don't put it in there, everything you see needs to be in your notes. All right, let's go ahead and get going. Okay. All vocab, basically you already know: sine, cosine, tangent. Those are the three most common trig functions that we're going to use in this section. There are two other terms that should be from geometry. They should be popping up from geometry. But if you don't remember, I've included both the vocab words from 5.4 and a picture to illustrate. The angle of elevation, the angle of depression, you got to start with a horizontal line of sight. So if you see this man right here, he's looking out straight ahead. And if he looks at an object above, that's the angle of elevation. If he looks at an object below, that's angle of depression. So elevate, and depress, lower, depress. So this will be important in a couple word problems that I throw out to you guys. So for now, let's just go ahead and keep going. Okay. This is where it's really important to know that theta is going to change your opposite and your adjacent sides of a triangle. First and foremost, let's go ahead, put your right angle indicators. Okay. And remember, always across from the right angle is going to be your hypotenuse. I need you to know that. Okay. So hypotenuse, hypotenuse, hypotenuse. That does not change. Okay. Now, If I have this angle, or if I have this angle, that changes what your opposite side is going to be. So, for example, let's put a theta right here. Okay, so the opposite side is going to be here. Okay, the opposite isn't always on the bottom. It just depends on where your theta is. And if this is your opposite, this is your adjacent, then there's your adjacent right there. Okay. So likewise, if I put my theta over here, for example, this is your op, this is your adjacent. Likewise, theta, op, adjacent. So you guys really got to pay attention to where you see that theta at, okay? That's going to be important in some of the problems that we go over. All right, next slide. Okay, so let's review SOHCAHTOA, which gives us our fractions that we need in order to solve for our variables. So right here, I want you to go ahead, put this down, put your letters down, and then I want you to go ahead and identify each letter. So you got your sine, you got your cosine, you got your tangent, and then you got opposite hypotenuse, adjacent hypotenuse, opposite adjacent, and your fractions are right here. Okay, so anytime I give you the function, the angle, that's going to equal your fraction. Okay, and I included a little picture here so that way theta's the opposite and adjacent. Remember, if theta was right here, that would be your adjacent, and this would be your adjacent. Okay. So go ahead, give you a couple more seconds to go to copy this down. Pause the video if you need, and let's move to the next slide. Okay, so right here is basically some pre-examples. These are not what you're going to see in the textbook for the homework, but it kind of gives you an opportunity to get ready for what trig functions you might need. So let's go ahead. Let's put our right angle down. Okay, and let's see. Let's go ahead and call this S. Let's call this. Can't call that T. Call this R. And let's call this T. Okay, so if you had me for geometry, if you didn't have me for geometry, you need to always remember, if the problem gives you information that your picture doesn't have, you need to go ahead and put it in the picture. So first and foremost, capital S equals 42 degrees. So let's go ahead, put 42 degrees down, and ST right here is going to be 8. Okay, so what you have right here is the angle that you're talking about, which is going to be your theta in this example. Okay, what you have right here is your adjacent, and it says find RS. RS happens to be the hypotenuse. So in this problem, we're talking about two things. We're talking about the adjacent, and we're talking about the hypotenuse. So if we were to set up an equation, what trig function can we use? Well, if we have SOHCAHTOA, which by now you guys should have memorized, but I'll write it down for you. If we have SOHCAHTOA, then what trig functions focuses on the hypotenuse and the adjacent? Yeah, you already figured it out. It's supposed to be cosine. So it says state which trig function you use to solve each problem. So I have here cosine. Okay. Remember, the angle goes here. So the cosine of S is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay. Another function you can use is the reciprocal of cosine, which is secant of S. Okay. And since it's the reciprocal, we just go ahead and flip these numbers. I'm throwing this out there because the book throws it out there, but for these problems, you're probably going to just use these three trig functions unless they give it to you. So cosine of s equals adjacent over hypotenuse. What do we know? We know the adjacent, but we don't know the hypotenuse. So I'm going to go ahead and just solve this for you. I have cosine of s is equal to 8 over rs. We don't know rs yet, okay? So how do we find rs? Well, we got to get it by itself. So the opposite of multiply is divide, and the opposite of divide is multiply. So I'm going to have cosine, bring that down. And I have 8 over rs. Multiply both sides by rs, okay? Because we're in the process of getting rid of it. Since these are inverse operations, they cancel. I have rs equals cosine of s, which is equal to 8. And that's not equal, that's times right there. Okay? Now, the one thing that I didn't put in here is s. We already know what s is. How do we know s? S is equal to 42. So we're supposed to put 42 down. Okay. And the reason we're doing that is because cosine 42 is a number. So if we divide both sides by cosine of 42, those cancel, and I'm left with, let's go ahead and get rid of this right here. rs, what we're trying to find, is equal to 8 over cosine of 42. Okay? Now your calculator must be in degree mode because we're talking about 42 degrees, not 42 radians. So after you type in 8 divided by cosine of 42 degrees, and let's round to the thousands, we're going to have .765. Okay, so that's basically how you're going to do these problems. Let's do the next one. Okay, next, if s is equal to 27, okay, and tr is equal to 7, find ts. Okay, so the problem is really asking for two things. It's asking what is ts, and look at your angle. So adjacent means next to, and since we know that we're not talking about the hypotenuse, we must be talking about the adjacent side. Okay, so we're talking about adjacent, and over here, this is the opposite. Okay, so what trig ratio concerns ourselves with the opposite and the adjacent? Tangent, O and A. So let's write that down. Tangent of, let's call it angle S, is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. Okay, you could also say cotangent, because cotangent of S would be adjacent over opposite. But for right now, let's stick with our three main trig ratios. So let's plug in what we know. We have tangent of 27 is equal to the opposite, which is 7, over the adjacent, which would be, we don't know. So let's put ST here, okay? We gotta go with the same process. So it would be ST and ST. These cross out. You have ST times tangent of 27 equals 7. Okay. Then you got to divide both sides by tangent of 27. So you have ST equals 7 over tangent of 27, which is approximately 13.738. Okay. Questions? Are you good? Are you comfortable? This is really not something we need to concern ourselves with right now because it's just saying state which trig ratio you would use to solve. Let's go ahead and hop into some real examples that are going to look like your homework problems. Next example, I'm going to go ahead and let you write those steps out. Number 1, you got to draw and label your triangle. Number 2, you got to determine which trig function you're going to use. And number 3, you got to actually use algebra to solve for your unknown side. So for exercise A, we're going to say if B equals 13 and capital A is equal to 76, find lowercase a. Okay, so first and foremost, let's label our triangle A. This is B. C will be our right angle. And remember I told you, opposite side or the lowercase letters. So little a, little b, tiny c. Okay, so our problem says B has to be 13. So we know that B is 13, and we know A has to be 76 degrees. Okay? So what are we trying to find? We're trying to find little a. Little a happens to be our opposite side of the angle that we're focusing on. And we already know B, okay, which is our adjacent side. Okay? So we've drawn our triangle, we've labeled our triangle, we know what sides we are focusing on. So step 2, it says determine which trig functions you're going to use. So if you guys don't have this memorized, and I'll be sorely disappointed if you don't, what trig function talks about opposite and adjacent? Tangent, opposite, adjacent. So go ahead and set your equation up. So tangent of the angle you're focusing on, 76. Okay, so tangent of 76 degrees, this is an actual number, is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. So the opposite, we don't know. So let's go ahead and put little a over the adjacent, which we do know, which is 13. Okay? So write the equation, solve for the unknown side. Algebra, you got to solve for your variable. So in order to get rid of this 13, we have to do the opposite, which is multiply by 13. So times by 13, times by 13. These cross out. Now you're left with 13 times tangent of 76, which is equal to A. Okay? A is by itself. We are going to know our side. So if you type into your calculator 13 times tangent of 76, you're left with 52.140. Okay, so are you comfortable? Are you comfortable? All right, let's see. Let's go ahead, pause the video in case you need to write this down. Okay. And I'm being destructive with my screen, but all in the name of math, right? So let's get rid of these. Let's get rid of these. Get rid of these. And get rid of that. Okay. So here's our triangle. And we have here if b equals 26 degrees and little b is equal to 18, find little c. Okay, so little c is right here. This is our hypotenuse. Got that. Little b, 18. Got that. And we know that big B is equal to 26 degrees. Okay? So here's our triangle. What are we talking about? We're talking about our angle, and we know the side across from that angle, which is our opposite side. Okay? So what do we know? We know the opposite side. We want to solve for C. What trig ratio do we need for opposite and hypotenuse? Sine. Sine, which is opposite and hypotenuse. So write that down. Sine of 26 degrees, okay, put your angle in, is equal to the opposite, which is 18, over the hypotenuse, we don't know. So put a C. Okay? So we're going to do this the same way. We got to get C by itself. So that's our equation. And I always like to rewrite everything to show my change. I have 18 over C times C. Okay? And whatever I did to one side, I got to do to the other. That cancels. And I'm left with C times sine of 26 is equal to 18. Okay? Then I got to divide by sine of 26. And why? Because remember I told you, sine of 26, this is a number. And we're multiplying, and what's the opposite of multiplying? Divide. And whatever you did to one side, you got to do to the other. These cancel. And you're left with C equals 18 divided by sine of 26 degrees. Okay? So C will approximately be 41.061. Okay, and that's a little tiny c. So we know that the hypotenuse is going to be approximately 41.061. Questions? Questions? Okay. Because I know you're going to come into class with questions, so it's all good. One more. Let's go ahead, edit this stuff. Now the third one shows that trig builds upon one another. Okay? So if B is equal to 16 degrees, 45 minutes, and C equals 13, find A. Okay, so what do we know? We know little c, so we know that this is 13. We want to find little a, okay, and we know B. Now, right here, this is going to be a decimal. So I'm going to show you the app that you can use to plug in 16 degrees, 45 minutes, in case you don't have the calculator, in case you're not doing this in class, okay? But I will tell you, if you did it by hand, this would have been 16 and then 45 over 60, okay? And we have no seconds. So this is going to be 16.75 degrees, okay? But I'll show you in the calculator how you can do that by calculator, but by hand, you just got to divide. Okay, so right here, 16.75 degrees. Set up your equation. So what's your equation? We want to find the opposite. No, we want to find the adjacent. So let's get rid of opposite. We want to find the adjacent because we're looking for little a. And we know our hypotenuse. So adjacent, hypotenuse, we're talking about cosine. So set it up. Cosine of 16.75 is equal to the adjacent a divided by the hypotenuse 13. Okay? As always, step 3, solve for algebra. Solve for the side using algebra. So we're going to multiply both sides by 13. Okay? Cross out. And now you have 13 times cosine of 16.75 degrees equals little a. Okay? Type that in your calculator. And you're left with 12.448 equals A. Okay? Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Are you comfortable? If you're not comfortable, make sure you come to class with questions. Try your homework, which is on Schoology. You can write me on Schoology. You can go to my teacher webpage using the QR code to get the homework. However you need to get it, go ahead and get it. Come to class with questions. Let me know. This is Fraser Nation, the Trigonometry Chronicles, signing off.